This presentation was designed for members of Otterbein University's Lifelong Learning Center. Although we are senior citizens, mostly retired, this information is valuable for anyone who is considering starting yoga or learning more about its fundamentals. Thomas Hanna, in his book Somatics, says that bodily decrepitude resumed under the myth of aging is not inevitable. It is, by and large, both avoidable and reversible. We want to be as fit as possible for the activities we most enjoy, for travel, for valuable time with friends and family. We expect that we will face physical challenges in later years, but we have no way of knowing what they will be or when we will encounter them. If they do happen, we want to minimize the time needed for any recovery and maximize the level of ability to which we return. I am convinced that yoga is the best way to do this. Today, I hope to persuade you that yoga is a way that will ensure that the rest of our lives is the best of our lives. These topics will be covered in the video. The time you spend on each is totally in your control. Skipping ahead when the information is not helpful or interesting. There will be times for activity. Feel free to join in as much or as little as you choose. They should be within the range of everyone's abilities. But be sure that you are always comfortable, that there is no suggestion of pain or discomfort in anything you do. Approaches to yoga. In the United States today, yoga is thought of as a physical practice to build strength, increase our flexibility and balance, and reduce stress. Traditionally, however, classical yoga was and is a spiritual tradition that leads to the understanding of our oneness with all things. There are many lists of reasons to do yoga. I have chosen this one because AARP is recognized as a reliable source of information. We know that what they publish is well researched and based on scientific methods and has verifiable results. Although you may be too young for this specific list, consider this a sneak preview. Starting early only increases the benefits of a regular yoga practice. I will elaborate on some of these items as they are applicable in later topics, but for now I will focus on only two. Yoga increases balance. Proprioception is the body's ability to orient itself in space, and this is impacted by vision and hearing, often lost as we age. The balancing poses in a yoga class are helpful in maintaining our sense of location and movement. Yoga poses work muscles and joints of the feet, ankles, knees, hips, and core. And these help us restore balance or prevent potential falls because it increases our strength and our agility. Yoga reduces depression. Recent studies show that two of the highest increases in suicide rates are in men over 65 and all people over 80. No definitive reason was given, but we can pretty well guess at the leading causes. Retirement often leaves us floundering for the meaning of life. The onset of Alzheimer's makes us fearful of the path down which we are heading. A diagnosis of a terminal illness may be the beginnings of pain and anguish for the rest of our lives. Loss of a beloved family or friend leaves us with deep sorrow. How does yoga help? It reduces stress hormones like cortisol, releases muscular tension, which can affect mood, promotes mindfulness, asking us to give full attention to the moment we are in. Recognize it as a gift that will never come again. The breathing exercises in yoga help us center ourselves and relax our mind and body. Every yoga class ends with some quiet, peaceful moments, guided imagery, meditation, or just relaxing. I've added these to the original list. Chronic inflammation is another AARP topic. In a November 2019 article, they showed it as an underlying cause for many illnesses we develop, linked with health issues ranging from arthritis to diabetes. The article discusses prevention, causes, and suggests including yoga as part of a healthy lifestyle. Another of their 10 recommended activities was church, not solely as prayerfulness within a building, but also as a dedicated time to contemplation, meditation, tuning into those values which are most important to us. Preventative health care is everything on the prior page. Doing yoga as a way of preventing illness, decreasing the burden of disease and associated risk factors. Many doctors are recommending preoperative care, both mental and physical, that's designed to improve the outcome of surgery or other procedures, decrease the risk for complications, make it as safe and effective as possible, minimize the time needed for a recovery, and maximize the level to which we can recover. I am convinced that yoga is one of the best ways to do this. Mental calmness was highlighted when we talked about depression. Doing yoga reduces stress, cultivating a sense of calm and decreasing anxiety. It encourages living in the moment, building confidence and strength and agility, and improving our coping skills as we confront the challenges of life. So all of this is theoretical, but now we'll get to the reality of my life, why I think yoga is important. I was born in 1940 and started doing yoga in my mid-50s, sporadically at first, and then I developed a regular practice and do so daily now. My health was generally good until 2011, when I was hospitalized for multiple pulmonary emboli in both lungs and put on massive doses of blood thinner. 5 days after my release from the hospital, I developed a sub-cranial hemorrhage. Went through a vestibular schwannoma that no one knew was there, but it damaged my 7th, 8th, and 9th subcranial nerve. I lost all hearing in my left ear, the functioning of the nerve on the left side of my face, and I lost much of the left eye vision. My face looked even worse than this woman's, with the cant to the mouth, the bend to the nose over to the side, and the big sag underneath my left eye. I spent 2 days in intensive care, and during that time I had filters put in my vena cava since I couldn't take blood thinners anymore, or needed to be a way of keeping any future clots moving up to my heart and lungs. I had to have my eye sewn shut to prevent severe drying and consequent loss of the eye. I spent 2 more days in the hospital, and then immediately afterward I went to 10 days of intensive rehab that covered physical, occupational, and speech therapies. When I arrived, I could not get out of bed. I could not stand on my own. Looking at this picture on the right, as is true in this, a therapist had to help hold me up using a strap around my waistline whenever I wanted to get out of bed, whenever I wanted to walk. But they knew I was a yoga teacher, and they let me begin doing what poses I could in bed, and then progressing throughout the week as I was able. I went home after that to a week of 24/7 care with the commitment of 6 more months in outpatient rehab. However, despite the severity of all this, 6 weeks after the event, I returned to work part-time. 2 weeks after that, I was back at work full-time, and within a month after that, I was back to teaching yoga classes. Unfortunately, 4 years later, I was homebound for weeks because of untreatable mud clots in both legs. The severity of the swelling, the impact on my circulation meant I could walk no more than 25 feet. I was committed to another round of physical therapy and yet again supplemented that with yoga. Third amount of damage to my health was finding out in the fall of 2018 that scar tissue now totally blocks my vena cava. The only way I get any blood flow from my lower extremities up into my heart and lungs is through the varicose veins my body has created in my torso. So why do I think that yoga was instrumental in getting me back to living a decent quality of life? Yoga therapy from the first day that I was in the hospital. I started in bed, just doing poses, and there are quite a number of them that can be done flat on your back. And I was able to add to it as I built up my confidence, able to go to floor exercises within 2 days, able to do assisted standing poses by the time I left. My base was strong because of my prior yoga practice. My core strength, the strength of my legs, my ability to support myself was already there. So when we began the therapy, we only had to focus on the things that were part of my current problem. I didn't have to rebuild things that should have been and in fact were ready. And my continuing yoga practice helps me maintain that strength and flexibility and overcome the balance problems that resulted from my loss of sight and hearing. As it often does, yoga helps focus on the present moment, what I could do today, now, to move forward. And because of this, I never got defeated by the height of the mountain I had to climb. Never considered that I would fail in my recovery, that I couldn't do it, that I couldn't move forward. Yogic breath control and exercises benefit my cardiovascular health. As we noted in AARP's list, it increases aerobic capacity. Studies, in fact, show that a 22% improvement is gained with a regular yoga practice. Other tests show that yoga improves 6 out of 7 measures of respiratory function. Yoga protects your heart, reduces blood pressure, significantly lowers levels of harmful LDL cholesterol. I live alone. I do my own cleaning, cooking, shopping. I painted a bedroom a year ago. I'm an avid gardener with rain, butterfly, herb, and rose gardens thriving. I drive. I travel. When I met with a vascular specialist last year, we discussed why he wouldn't recommend surgery. He asked me several times in that interview what it was that I wanted to do that I couldn't do. I had no answer for that. I am, at nearly 80 years of age, content with the quality of my life and have no doubt of yoga's positive impact on it. As I experienced, yoga is very beneficial in improving cardiovascular and pulmonary systems. Pranayama is the ancient Sanskrit name for the regulation of the breath, controlling the motions of inhale and exhale through using various techniques and exercises. Believe then, as it is now, that by regulating prana, that life force in our body, we can regulate the mind. As I said, for me, yoga helped improve my respiratory, circulatory, as well as my digestive system. A consistent yoga practice decreases blood pressure, slows your pulse rate, improves blood circulation so we're transporting more nutrients and oxygen throughout our body. We have a decreased respiratory rate, the lungs are working more efficiently, and we have higher cardiovascular endurance. We are going to do some breathing exercises. Just doing the standard yogic breath, which is really exactly the same kind of breathing techniques that you would be given were you talking to a medical professional, an athletic trainer, anyone who is into knowing the necessity of breathing well. So we're going to make sure that we're sitting up nice and tall with our feet flat on the floor. If we'd like to, we can move a little bit further forward on the seat of our chair. We just want to start tuning into our breath, just paying attention to where we feel any movement. Breathing in through our nose, because that is the organ that filters and warms our breath. We breathe out through our nose to keep the warmth in our body, or we can breathe out through our mouth if we feel the need to cool down. What we're noticing as we're paying attention to our breath, that some breaths are longer, some shorter, some deeper, some more shallow. We're not trying to regulate the breathing in any way, just paying attention to it. And as we pay attention to the mechanics of the breath, we are noticing how we're increasing the peace of mind, letting go of all those concerns and cares and worries that would otherwise occupy our attention. And then we think that we want the most efficient and calming breath by working with our diaphragm, the major muscle of breathing. So we might think about putting one hand on our belly, another hand on the side of the rib cage. And notice what's happening. If we are working with that diaphragm, it's going to be dropping down as we inhale to make more room for the lungs to expand. So we'll find the belly moving out toward our hand at the start of our inhale. And then the muscles of the rib cage are going to open up the ribs, stretch them out and up in a bucket handle kind of effect, so that we can fill up more air in the middle lungs. And then lastly, the chest will lift. As we exhale, it's going to be just the reverse. The air comes out of the top of our lungs as the diaphragm starts moving up. Then it's going to move to the middle of the lungs as the rib cage starts to close, push all that middle air out. And then lastly, belly moving back as the diaphragm moves up, leaving much more room for the internal organs to spread out in that cavity below the diaphragm. So as we breathe in and out, we'll just concentrate on this, maybe imagining it like a Ferris wheel. Or more often than not, recommendation of a wave-like motion. Thinking of our lap being that smooth surface, but then as that wave rolls in, we feel the belly lifting. And we get to the crest of the wave as we open up even wider through the rib cage until we find that wave starting to foam at our chest, and then rolling back down under the next incoming wave. Concentrating so hard on our breath that we move from thinking mode to feeling mode. Breathing in tranquility as we breathe out tension. Breathing in serenity as we breathe out stress. There are many different yoga exercises, some that ask for breath retention, other maneuvers to help us focus even more deeply on our breathing. And you will encounter them as you go through your yoga practice. Hopefully by now you are thinking that you should look a bit further into doing yoga, but haven't any idea where to start. There are variations on variations of yoga classes, but somewhere nearby there was one ideally suited to you. This diagram is simplistic, but it does give an idea of the kinds of questions to ask yourself and the variety of choices that you have. Of these pictures, the one on the top left is one from my senior yoga class, offers a variety of modifications that one can use within a yoga class. You'll see chairs in the background for anyone who chooses not to get down on the floor. This pose, camel pose, back bending, back strengthening pose, is being done by one of the ladies standing and the other one kneeling, depending upon how much tender loving care is needed for the knees. On the right hand side are two of the ladies who participate in my traditional Hatha yoga class. It is at an intermediate level. Please note that all these people are wearing just casual clothes, t-shirts, sweatpants, yoga pants, whatever suits. In the middle row, left hand side, is a restorative yoga position. On the right hand side is a Vini yoga, or adaptive yoga. I'll talk about both of those in a few more minutes, as I will the one on the bottom left. That is a Bikram yoga class. The one in the middle is a class in which people are able to bring their dogs if they feel that they're not spending enough quality time with them. I don't know that the ladies are called yogis or yoginis, but I don't think that the pets are called doggies. On the left, there's a rarely found type of yoga class. It's one in which baby goats are brought in so they can massage your back in various poses. It's a class I would not recommend. A diagram that shows you many of the different kinds of yoga. Certainly not the full panoply of all of them that are available, but it gives you different areas in which classes are being held. Hatha yoga is the foundation of most of these yoga styles. It is one that has been known to have been practiced for hundreds of years, and it's the basis of most of the other flavors of yoga being done today. There are beginner, intermediate, advanced levels. When you're looking at brochures on websites, you'll see some that don't have a specific yoga type, but you'll see names like senior yoga, beginner's yoga, gentle yoga. You can be pretty much assured that those will all be the Hatha style of yoga. Specialty classes, particularly in the healing area, alignment as well, can be found all over. We saw the picture on the first page of the diagrams that showed the woman in a restorative yoga pose with lots of bolsters around, very quiet, peaceful ambiance, poses held for extended periods of time. These are the kinds of classes that are for people who need a great deal of de-stressing. They need the ambience and the time frame that induces a deep relaxation. Vini yoga means that these are adaptive yoga classes. The one that we saw in that first diagram again, with people doing yoga in wheelchairs, was one such program. There are many different kinds of adaptive yoga, very often for people who are undergoing therapy, either temporary or long-term, people who have conditions such as multiple sclerosis, asthma, heart conditions, that need an ongoing gentle class that suits them. Cancer survivors have many opportunities, often able to find free classes both during the time when they are getting therapy and afterward through the entire extent of their survival. Chair yoga for seniors can be considered in this category as well. Yoga is also increasingly offered to people suffering from PTSD. It might be from military service, surviving a natural catastrophe, or any other particularly challenging life event. You may be aware that two of the Parkland survivors who lived through that mass shooting have since committed suicide. School children are being stressed by their frequent shooter drills, and they are now being offered mindfulness meditation to restore peace of mind. So if you have a health challenge of any kind, look for yoga classes. You may find them at different yoga studios, but more often they'll be at hospitals, health centers, or different health consortiums in your area. The third set of classes are ones that I give you a warning more. Yoga is generally not an aerobic exercise. You still want to be doing your walking, your running, your biking, your swimming, whatever you do for that aerobic activity. Ashtanga yoga, however, is one that is continually moving with your breath. Usually the classes are a sequence of poses that last for 60 or even 90 minutes. You will see other classes out there with names such as flow yoga, but these are derived from this same Ashtanga yoga concept, so they will be continuously moving. Please check before you attend one to make sure that's true in their case, that they haven't done a modification of it, and make sure that you would be able to keep up for that length of time with an aerobic activity. The last two, I strongly recommend that you talk to your medical practitioner before you attend. The conditions in which they are done can be very stressful, particularly for those who have existing health conditions that are impacting the heart or lungs. These are done generally in rooms that are 105 degrees Fahrenheit with 40% humidity. Many of us would not even want to walk outside on that kind of ambiance. So I would strongly advise you to be very careful before you start taking such a class. Osteoarthritis is a degenerative disease brought on just by the use of muscles over time. We note that it's one of the leading causes of disability in America, that it limits our everyday activities, causes painful restriction, and we find it mainly in weight-bearing and active joints. These diagrams of the knees give you some idea of what's happening with an arthritic joint. Over on the left, we see a normal joint. In the middle, joint suffering from osteoarthritis. The one on the right, rheumatoid arthritis, which can be help very, very little in a yoga class, but certainly we can do quite a bit with the osteoarthritis. If we look at these bluish teal areas on the middle and the left diagrams, this is the synovial fluid. This is the body's WD-40 that lubricates the joints. The catch-22 with arthritis is we only get that built up and generated when we exercise. But with arthritis, it's painful to exercise, so many of us don't try to get those joints moving, don't bring the warmth, the blood flow through those areas. But we know that the slow, deliberate movement of yoga poses, coupled with the gentle pressure on the joints, provides excellent exercise to relieve arthritis symptoms. The stress relief associated with yoga loosens muscles that tighten the joints. Pain tolerance has proven to be much higher among those who practice yoga regularly. So these are all reasons that we would want to consider doing yoga on a regular basis. Our joint ring exercises, they were developed by Mukunda Stiles, director of his own studio in Boulder, Colorado, and the author of a leading yoga therapy text. He notes that this series of poses move each joint gently and systematically through its full and natural range of motion to enhance joint mobility and relieve joint pain and stiffness. Each one of this and the next 3 slides shows you these different poses. It gives you the first and then the second movement involved with the inhale and the exhale. They're easy to follow, they're easy to read. Suggestion was made by Mukunda Stiles when I took the course with him was that you do each pose 3 times. There is no need to extend it to a great many times. 3 times he felt was sufficient to get the joints moving in the area that they needed. I will let you go ahead on these and do them now if you choose. I will wait a sufficient amount of time that would allow you possibly to get through them. If you choose to do this at a later time or not do them at all at any time, feel free just to move forward in the video to get to the next stage. But starting with our stick pose, Dandasana. These can just as easily be done seated on a chair. For the most part, there are a couple of them that will be otherwise. I will note those when we get to those slides. On pose number 7, we want to make sure that we do them equally on each side. So after we've done 3 with one leg lifted, then we'll switch to the other side. 6, 7, and 8 can all be done with our hands on a seat of a chair if we do not want to get down on the floor. So then we would just have the hands on the seat of the chair and our knees and our hips and our feet in alignment. Again, all of these can be done seated on a chair. We want to be very careful if we have bad knees that we don't want to be sitting with our legs this severely flexed, so using the chair might be a better option. We could always sit as well in tailor pose with our legs straight in front of us. Then at the knees are straight as we choose. And again, we can be seated in any comfortable position. As you notice on 16 and 17, that's tailor pose. 15 is still in our thunderbolt pose, so being careful of our knees, seating as we wish. When we get to those that involve the twist on number 18, the one on the side bend on 17, and then all the ones dealing with the head, making sure again that whatever we do in one direction, we do equally as many times in the opposite direction. So going ahead and continuing with our breath, with our arm flexion and extension. This is a simple practice that we could do daily, taking maybe 10, at most 15 minutes out of our day to make sure that we have the greatest flexibility, ease of joint movement as possible. Now you have an idea what yoga can do, what kinds of classes to look for, but we need to talk a little more about what you need to get started. The only critical ingredient in any yoga class is you. Each of us has a different body shape and size, age, unique physical history, DNA. You are the only one who can tell when you are finding benefit from any yoga pose without strain, without pain. You want to come to a class or do yoga at home with an open mind and plenty of patience, but yoga is all about you. What you wear when you do yoga is only determined by comfort. If you can bend and stretch without splitting seams, you are wearing the right yoga outfit. You can take a yoga class at a fitness, recreation, senior center, Y, hospital and health centers, churches and associations. Having an instructor is beneficial in learning the ropes. However, if you are shy about doing so, there is much you can do from home. Libraries have many choices of books and videos, and you can search their catalogs by keyword. Decide on what you want most out of a yoga clothes. Look for words like gentle, chair, for arthritis, for bad backs, whatever suits. The web has hundreds of choices. Some of these are from yoga organizations such as Yoga Journal. YouTube has yoga sessions ranging in time from minutes and hours. Again, look for keywords just as you would in a library catalog. Experiment. Each yoga teacher has a different style, different training, different objectives. Search until you find the one in which you feel most comfortable. So these are the 3 necessary parts of taking a yoga class. The next 4 are ones that are optional, not required. But if you are a person who is balance challenged or otherwise health challenged, using a chair or wall for support is very helpful. At home, this is easy to arrange, but making sure that the chair is firmly supported on the floor, it's not going to tip or slide on you. If you go elsewhere, occasionally you may find chairs in the room, but if not, position yourself so you can be close to a wall and get the support you need when you need it. The surface is not an issue when you go outside for a class. If you're working at home, wood, carpet, vinyl tile are good. Ceramic, stone, brick, other such surfaces are hard on the joints, particularly the knees. When the weather is right, going outdoors into your yard on your grass on a warm, sunny spring, fall, summer day is a great way to do yoga. Most people use a yoga mat. Some locations supply one, most don't. Although the surface on which you are may not require that you use a mat, for example on a carpet, it may be soft enough, steady enough. Most people want their own personal space, want to make sure that the cleanliness of the area that they're using is up to their standards. Yoga mats are often called sticky mats because they do not slide along the floor. Your feet do not slide on the surface. Keeping that in mind, do not use things like blankets or towels because that will not be true. Yoga props like blocks and strap are particularly helpful in the early stages of a yoga practice. They enable you to get into a pose with the proper alignment and support and move a little more deeply into it. There is no need to purchase expensive equipment. A bathrobe belt, dog leash, well-worn towel, or any other non-stretching material of suitable length will work just as well as a yoga strap. Bolsters, pillows, folded blankets, again, can come from your home. They're helpful to sit on if you have tight hips and hamstrings. They're good padding for the knees if you're down on the floor. They can be used in a variety of ways, so they might be something that you want to keep in mind as having handy when you're doing a yoga practice. These 7 principles of alignment come from Beth Shaw's Yoga Fit, the organization through which I did my teacher training. It focuses on fitness and safety as we do yoga. The first is the foundation that we establish. For doing anything that we have the weight on our hands, we want to make sure that we use the starfish hands. So we're going to start just by putting our hands on our thighs, or if we're in a standing position, we could put our hands on top of a table or on the seat of the chair. But we want to make sure that we have the fingers widespread, that we root down through the first finger and the thumb, that we think about pressing into the knuckles, the pads of the fingers, so that we take the weight off the wrists. When we're doing the foundational feet, if we're not already doing so, let's stand. And we're going to think, as we did in the joint freeing exercises, about that eversion and inversion, curling our toes under, rolling toward the outside of our feet, and then spreading our toes and rolling inward. Then we'll flatten out our feet. We'll roll from the heel forward to the toes, feeling the edges of the feet, particularly the front of the ball of the feet as we roll back and forth. Then we'll plant our feet flat on the floor, such that the inner edges of the feet are parallel, that the heel of the foot is lining up with our sit bones. We should be able to pick up our toes and feel those inner, outer, front, back edges of the feet before we let our toes drop to the ground. We want to be thinking of lifting through the arches of the feet, stretching high. Regardless of what position we're in, whether we have the feet together or have the feet a distance apart, we are going to make sure that this is the way we have our feet planted. When we're in a standing pose, this picture shows the woman with her arms raised overhead, but this is not necessarily true. It's just for illustrative purposes. But we want a neutral spine, so we don't want our toes sticking backward or forward. We want our head lining up with our spine. So we should have a plumb line from our ear through our shoulder, through the middle of our hip, down into our feet. We're thinking about pulling our shoulder blades in toward our spine, called retraction, and then down toward our waistline, depression. That helps us get a longer line through the spine. It helps us open up the chest, keeps us from rounding our shoulders, improves our cardiopulmonary capacity. And having that good alignment improves our ability to stand up straight, to look good while we're standing, to have our clothes hang correctly, maybe even to look as though we're 10 pounds lighter without losing weight. Posture important, here as it always is. The knee alignment is important for keeping our knees safe. When we are standing, we want to make sure that we place the knee directly over the ankle unless the pose is specifically designed to do otherwise. But for the most part, standing poses, seated on a chair, whatever, we want to make sure that we have that knee in alignment with the ankle, that we have the middle of the knee lining up with the middle of the foot. And for the most part, unless otherwise designed, as we look down over our knee, we want to be able to see our big toe. We keep the thigh muscles engaged and press down through the base of the heel as well as the ball of the foot. Hip hinge is important for keeping the back safe. So there's two ways that we will be moving. We're thinking about imagining our hip area as one pelvic bowl. These are mostly fused bones. We've got the sacral spine in the back with our tailbone as the bottom of those five, making a triangular shape across the back. We've got the pubic bone that joins in the front. The bony part that we can feel on the sides of our hip is our iliac crest, and that big bone that it's the top of is called the iliacus. So those are all fused together. And when we are moving forward, leaning forward, doesn't matter whether we're standing, whether we're seated on the floor, in a chair, wherever we may be, we're always going to make sure that we're going to tilt that pelvic bowl forward. So our tailbone moves backward. That bony part, the iliac crest, is going to move in the direction the shoulders go. So as we come forward, we start pulling down in toward our thighs by tightening our abdominals, tightening our quadriceps, and slowly moving forward. As we do so, we want to make sure that the hands are not hanging loosely in space in front of our body, because that's putting all added weight of our shoulders and our arms into the lower back. So as we come down, we can slide our hands along the surface of our legs from our thighs down to our shins as low as we'd like to go. We'll stand up again. This time as we come forward, if we want to snow angel our hands around to the side and then bring them down in toward our legs, we can do that as well. But we make sure that it is always the bend, starting with that pelvic tilt forward, the anterior tilt, imagining ourselves as if we were pouring water down between our feet. The reverse of that, when we're doing a back bend, is the posterior tilt. So we can start by placing our hands as fists on the back of our hips or putting our palms against our kidneys so we can attend to what's going on a little bit more. We're going to think this time that we're still going to move that iliac crest in the direction that the shoulders are going. So that's going to be up and backward. And we're going to think about pouring water out of our tailbone down between the heels of our feet. So we tuck the tailbone forward. We make length from the pubic bone to our navel as if we were zipping up a jacket. And then make length from our navel to our solar plexus, then up to our heart, and all the way up through the midline of our body. As we tilt our head back, we watch that we're not compressing the cervical spine. The back of the neck is not uncomfortable. And we make sure we can continue to breathe evenly and deeply. We'll stand up tall again and practice it another time, starting with the tailbone tucking forward, pulling up the front of that pelvic bowl as if we had a handle on it, and lifting tall, stretching the heart up toward the sky, pulling our shoulder blades tight together, and then coming back and standing tall. Lever length is something to keep in mind, particularly if we have stiffness, injuries, soreness in the shoulders, the hips, the knees. And it's talking about the length from the joint that's starting the movement to the end of the body appendage that's being moved. So let's think about, first of all, working with the arms and bending our elbow, bringing our hand up toward our shoulder. Let's just gently lift that elbow forward and then back down toward our side. And now do the same thing with our arms straight and noticing whether or not we feel more work, especially through the upper arm and the shoulder. Lifting down and up with our breath. And now let's do the same thing to the side. Bringing the hand out to the side of the shoulder with the elbow bent, and then slowly lift that elbow up toward the sky. Exhaling, bringing it back down. Doing it again and noticing the sensations. And now let's do that with our arms straight, and again noticing whether or not we feel more work being done through the top of the shoulder into the upper arm. So if that causes pain or strain for any reason, we are going to keep the elbow bent, maybe even in closer toward our body. than we would otherwise. The same is true with our legs. Let's try lifting our leg in front by bending our knee, pulling it up as high as we'd like, dropping it back down. Another time lifting that knee and down to the floor. Let's do that now with a straight leg. Lifting our leg as high as we'd like, might be just a few inches, might be even with our hip or even higher. Then we'll lower to the floor, try it again. And see whether or not we feel as though we have to do more work on the front of that thigh, the quadriceps, through that hip flexor that hooks up our spine down into our femur. We'll do the same thing, lifting our leg out to the behind us. We're going to bend our knee and swing it back and forward with our breath. And now try it with a straight leg, and try not to bend through, arching the back, but keeping just the movement through the hip and noticing how much more we can get out of a bent knee than we do with a straight leg. We can do the same thing to the side. Maybe not as noticeable, but trying it with a bent knee and then with a straight leg. And then coming back. If we're in a standing position, let's come to a seated position. It's easier to see how this works from there, but can be equally as well practiced by standing. But it is important to keep our lower back strong. This is not one of the original 7 principles of alignment, but it is important, particularly if we have any problems with lower back pain. We want to make sure that the weakest parts of the spine, where our sacral spine meets our lumbar, and where our lumbar meets our thoracic up near the shoulder blades, are the weakest part. We want to get them in position first before we start moving through the upper part of the torso. So we're always going to start with the lowest part, the hip area, and then move up to the shoulders last. So we plant our feet flat on the floor, or we can sit on the floor, making sure both sit bones are on the ground, or if we're standing, we know our foundational feet. But regardless of where we are, we're going to start pulsing on our right hip. We're going to see how that starts moving a twist over toward the left through the lowest part of the torso. Let's just pulse on that hip a couple times to see how that works. Now we'll move up to the rib cage. So we can place our one hand on the side of the ribs and think after we pulse on the hip that we're going to pull around through the rib cage. Come back and do that again. Pulse on the hip through the rib cage. So we've got the sacral spine, lumbar spine turning, and now we're going to turn all the way to the side, working more through the shoulders, trying to get our hands lined up with the midline front and back. If we don't want to reach that far, that's fine, but we're also thinking about that back shoulder, making sure that we're working the muscles on the upper back shoulder so that we're getting that shoulder pulling back behind us. We're not letting it collapse forward. And then we'll rotate back toward the center, and we'll try this again in one smooth motion, the pulse on the hip, rotating through the rib cage, and then across the shoulders, taking our time, enjoying the journey, never rushing into any pose. And then we're going to come back to center and work on the opposite side. So we can put our hand on the opposite hip, pulse on that hip, and see how that starts, the movement through the hip area first. Our belly starts leaning over toward the opposite leg. And now we're going to put our other hand on the side of the rib cage. We're going to pulse on the hip. We're going to pull that rib cage around, come back to our start, another time, and back. And now we're going to rotate on hip, rib cage, shoulder. Come back again, try a hip, rib cage, shoulder, and then trying to get our hands even with our midline. Trying to work the muscles on the upper back shoulder so we keep our turn to the side without letting that shoulder collapse forward. And then coming back toward center. These are important things to keep in mind, to keep primarily our knees, our back, but every joint, every muscle as safe as we possibly can to avoid injury to ourselves. Like arthritis, back pain is another situation that can be alleviated by a regular practice of yoga. As Mayo Clinic tells us, back surgery can relieve some of the causes of back pain, but it's rarely necessary. Most back pain resolves itself. Problems typically respond to non-surgical treatments. Physical therapy is one of those. Physical therapists often include yoga poses. Yoga by itself can help a great deal toward easing back pain. This is more detail from AARP's reasons. People who took 2 90-minute classes a week for 6 months, one study showed, reduced their back pain by 56%. Those who got standard medical care experienced just a 16% decrease in pain, an indication of how well yoga can work. So we're going to do a sequence of gentle poses that are going to help with back pain. They're going to be done seated on a chair. Many of them can be done either in standing positions or seated on the floor. But for ease, for all of us today, we'll stay seated on the chair. We know the foundational principles. How our feet are supposed to be planted with the heels lining up with our sit bones. We want to be sitting a little bit away from the back of the chair, but make sure that we pull our feet forward so our knees and ankles are in alignment. And we're just going to start with some pelvic tilts. So as we make sure we're on both sit bones, our spine is stretched tall, our chin parallel to the floor, we're just going to pull our belly forward on our inhale, and then as we exhale, we're going to push our waistline back toward the back of the chair. And working with our breath, pulling forward, noticing how we're getting a change on that pelvic bowl. We're actually getting our anterior tilt as we come forward because the tailbone is moving behind us. And then the posterior tilt as we move back. Now we're going to work a little bit more on working through the waistline by doing some back circles. So this time as we pull forward, we're going to start rolling our hips over toward one side. Then we're going to push that waistline as far as we can toward the back of the chair. Then we're going to pull over to the other side. So we're just making a circle through our midsection, involving the lower back and the hips. And then we'll reverse direction. Nice, slow, easy inhale as we come forward and a gentle exhale as we move backward. And then as we sit up tall, we're going to go into our cat-cow. One of the best poses for arthritis through the spine, lower back problems, tightness through the hips. So we're going to have our hands resting comfortably on our lap, maybe letting our heels of our hands up above our knees, our fingertips below. And we're going to push back with our belly toward the back of the chair, push back with the spine, rounding it as much as we can, and then let the shoulders roll together in the front before we drop our chin in toward our chest. In the opposite direction, our cow face. We're going to pull the belly forward as the tailbone starts lifting behind us. That iliac crest is going to start moving forward. We pull our rib cage as far forward as we can before we pull our shoulder blades together and lift our chin. Coming back into our cat. So thinking about always starting with the lowest part of the spine, the sacral, then the lumbar, then the thoracic, and then the cervical. Lastly, chin into chest. Coming forward again, belly first, rib cage, shoulders, shoulder blades pulling together before we lift our chin. Pushing backwards, we're rounding toward the back of the chair, but making sure that we start with the lowest part of the spine, working up to our neck. As we come forward, same idea. It's always the sacral, lumbar, thoracic, and cervical spine. And then we'll take this to a back bend, so we're going to start sitting up nice and tall. We remember when we do these that the tailbone's going to be pushing forward toward the front of the chair. We're going to take that iliac crest and we're going to pull it up high and then lift it backward. We can plant our hands on the sides of the chair to give us stability and a little bit more ability to stretch, or we can take our hands as fists on the back of the hips or palms against kidneys. Anyway, we start that pelvic tilt. We think about zipping as we pull the belly forward and making as much length as we can from the pubic bone to our navel. And then we're going to lift our heart up toward the sky. As we exhale, we're going to come back to our starting position. Deep breath in, pushing belly forward, opening through the rib cage, spreading wide through the shoulders as we lift the chin, coming back to our starting position. And one more time. Again, if we want to press into the hands, we might get a little more lift through the heart, and then coming back to our start. Now we're going to start moving into a child's pose in steps. So we're going to start sitting nice and tall, letting our hands hang down the sides of the chair. We're going to roll our chin in toward our chest, and then we're going to keep rolling forward, bringing our belly down toward our thighs. And then slowly dropping our hands as close down toward our feet as we'd like. Deep breath in as we sit up tall. Exhale, rounding the chin, letting the shoulders round. Continuing to drop down until our belly is down on our thighs or as close as we can get comfortably, and then letting the hands drop down to the floor. Deep breath in as we sit up tall. Exhale as we drop chin into chest. Inhale as we drop belly down to thighs. Exhale as we drop hands to the floor. Stretching through the back helps much with any back pain that we might have. But remember that we never want to pull the arms straight forward in front of the shoulders. We'd like to snow angel them out to the side because we're going to come into a forward fold. And we don't want all that weight of our arms and shoulders on our hands. So we'll take a deep breath in, stretching high to the sky as we bring the arms out to the side. And then arms straight out to the side as we hinge at the hips. That anterior tilt, abs tighten, quads tighten. As we lean forward, bringing our hands to the side of our legs. Deep breath in, stretching high to the sky. Exhaling, coming forward again. Thinking about abdominals, tightening down into the quadriceps as low as we can drop forward. So we're feeling that stretch across the back of the hips. Inhaling, stretching high. Exhaling, coming down again. And we'll take this to a forward fold. Again, we're going to straighten out one leg. We're going to have our other foot planted flat on the floor so that we can keep our stability. We're going to do our hip hinge again. Coming forward, taking both hands down the long leg, trying to see if we can reach them down to our thighs first, maybe then down to our shins, maybe even reaching for our toes. If we'd like, we can really push through the heel of that foot. We'll take a deep breath in, slowly sit up. Exhale into that fold again. Taking our time, enjoying the journey. Nice slow exhale as we tighten our body in toward our leg. Deep breath in as we sit up tall. Coming forward one more time. And then we'll switch to the opposite side. So straightening out the opposite leg, the other foot planted flat on the floor again, knee and ankle in alignment. We want to make sure that we're not hyperextending that extended leg, but we'd like to push through the heel. Pelvic tilt. That hip hinge that pulls our body low in toward our legs. We can do more if we tighten abs, tighten quads, and sitting up tall on our inhale. Exhaling forward. Inhaling tall. Exhaling forward. Inhaling tall. Spinal twists are one of the best ways that we can loosen up through the spine. Really good again for people with lower back problems, people with arthritis of the spine. There are a number of ways that twists can be done. Doesn't matter whether we're seated on a chair, on the floor, lying on our backs, lying on our bellies, kneeling down. Just multiple variations of ways we can do a twist, but we'll do the simple one now. Remembering that we do this corkscrew, so we're going to pulse on one side of our hip. We're going to start rotating out to the opposite side as we work through the rib cage. And lastly, try and get those shoulders as much aligned to our midline in the front as we can before we exhale back to center. Another turn to that same side, pulsing on the far hip, rotating through the rib cage, and then lastly into the shoulders before we come back to center. One more time around the center, and then switching to the opposite side. So pulsing on the opposite hip, turning in the opposite direction, rotating around till we get the shoulders as closely lined. Turn our midline front to back as possible. Coming back with a deep breath in, turning as far as we can to the side, to center again, to the side, and then coming back. So this was a very short sequence that would help a lot when our back is stiff. Doesn't necessarily have to be a continuing back pain. It might be just doing some gardening or snow shoveling or something that we haven't done in a while where the back gets stiff. Over the last hour and some, we've learned a lot about how to get started in a yoga practice, done a few yoga poses, exercises that help us with different situations. We usually finish every yoga class, very often start them with the word namaste. This is a guided meditation that talks about that. As is usually true, yoga sessions end with some kind of guided imagery, quiet relaxation time, maybe even just a meditation that we do on our own, something that gets us out of our thinking mode into our being mode, that allows us to totally relax. Namaste is a salutation that is widely used in Southeast Asia. It is done as a respectful form of greeting, acknowledging and welcoming a relative, friend, acquaintance, or stranger. It is used with goodbyes as well as in greetings. It is derived from the Sanskrit word namas, meaning bow or obeisance, and te, meaning you. It is literally translated as, I bow to you. When greeting another, we bring the palms of the hands together in front of our heart, fingers upward in prayer position, and bow our heads. Bringing the hands together is a highly symbolic gesture in Eastern practice. According to tradition, the right hand represents the higher self, or the divine within, while the left hand represents the lower, worldly self. By pressing the palms together, we unite these two aspects and attempt to connect with the person being greeted. The gesture is a gracious form of extending friendship in love, respect, and humility. Broader interpretations of Namaste are, I bow to the good qualities in you. I honor the place in you which is of love, truth, light, and peace. I honor the sacredness and equality in us all. All that is best and highest in me salutes all that is best and highest in you. I believe that the life force, the divinity in me, is the same in all. Depending on one's spiritual beliefs, this divinity might be the God you honor, within a traditional religion or otherwise. Those who have no religious belief might consider this the life force, cosmic energy, the universal energy in every object throughout creation. From either viewpoint, we recognize that we are all vital to the present moment in the universe. Namaste brings to mind our awareness that we cannot exist alone. We are woven into the fabric of all creation, our threads connecting to those around us, near or far, currently being woven or included in the fabric long ago, and impacting the weaving of the cloth into the future. The integrity of the fabric is impacted by the closeness of our connection to those other threads, providing support, flexibility, strength. A weakness, a separateness in any part of the fabric impacts the strength of the whole cloth. So when saying namaste, we remind ourselves of our interconnectivity with others and the need to treat all with kindness, understanding, and compassion. Namaste could be a casual or formal greeting, a cultural convention, or an act of worship. However, the real meeting between people is not the type of greeting expressed, but the meeting of our minds. The first step in being compassionate is developing the ability to enter into the mind of others, fostering understanding so that we can share their inner life in a profound way. Namaste signifies our awareness that we are inextricably woven together in the fabric of life, and helps us to interact with others with acceptance, empathy, support, and compassion. So sitting up tall in a chair, taking a deep breath in, we'll snow angel our arms around to the side and reach high to the sky before we bring our palms together down to heart center. And slowly bow our heads as we say to each other, Namaste.